Right now, somewhere below you, a 60-foot animal is dropping into total darkness. It holds its breath. The pressure outside its body builds to a force that would flatten a steel drum. It goes deeper. Then it finds something armed with rotating hooks and a beak that can cut steel cable, and the fight begins. We are going inside the deep ocean, into the scarred skin of the largest hunting animal alive, into battles no human has ever seen, and into mysteries scientists still cannot explain. If this keeps you up at night, subscribe, prepare yourself. We start now. Stand at the edge of the ocean and look out. What you see is a flat, glittering surface, waves, maybe a few birds. It looks manageable. It looks like something you could understand. You are looking at the roof of a world that goes down nearly 7 miles. Most people know the top layer. It is where fish dart around coral reefs, where dolphins play in boat wakes, where sea turtles come up for air. Sunlight reaches this zone. Plants grow here. It feels alive and familiar, the same ocean you have seen in documentaries and vacation photos. Below 200 feet, the sunlight starts to fade. Colours disappear one by one. Red goes first, then orange, then yellow. By the time you reach 600 feet, every colour is gone. The water is not blue anymore. It is black. Scientists call this the midnight zone. No sunlight reaches it. The temperature drops to just above freezing. The pressure is so heavy it would crush a human body in seconds. Most people assume nothing important lives there. That assumption is wrong. Below the midnight zone sits the abyssal zone, depths that stretch down to 13,000 feet. A place so dark, so cold, so heavy with pressure that for most of human history we assumed it was essentially empty. Then we started finding things. A tooth. A tentacle fragment. A piece of something huge, recovered from the stomach of an animal that had dived down and come back up covered in scars. The ocean is not a flat place. It is a stacked world, layer after layer, each one darker and stranger than the one above it. And the creature that connects those worlds, that breathes at the surface and hunts in the abyss, is the sperm whale. Here is the thing that stops most people when they first hear it. The sperm whale is not a deep-sea creature. It is a mammal. It breathes air. It gives birth to live young. It nurses them with milk. In almost every way that matters biologically, it is closer to you than it is to the creatures it hunts. And yet it descends into a place where no sunlight has ever reached, where the pressure crushes metal, where temperatures hover just above freezing, and where it fights animals the size of school buses armed with rotating hooks. Every time. Regularly, as a normal part of staying alive. The sperm whale is the only animal on Earth that crosses every layer of the ocean, from the sunlit surface down to the crushing dark of the abyss. It lives in both worlds. It belongs to both. And the life it leads down there is one of the most violent, extreme, and poorly understood stories in all of biology. We know pieces of it. We know it from the scars on the whale's skin, from the beaks inside its stomach, from the sounds it makes in the dark. We have never actually seen the battles themselves. Nobody has. The deep ocean hides them completely. What we do know is that every adult sperm whale you have ever seen in a photo carries thousands of marks on its skin. Circles the size of dinner plates, long gouges that run across its face like claw marks. Something down there is fighting back. And up next, we find out exactly what kind of animal chooses to go down into that darkness on purpose. The sperm whale is enormous. A full-grown male stretches 60 feet from nose to tail. That is roughly the length of 2 city buses parked end to end. It weighs over 50 tons. Its head alone accounts for nearly a third of its entire body length, a massive, blunt, rectangular block of flesh and bone that looks almost engineered, like something built rather than grown. At the surface, this animal is the apex predator. Nothing hunts an adult male sperm whale. Nothing even tries. Its size alone makes it untouchable. So why does it dive? The answer is hunger. The deep ocean, dark and cold as it is, holds an enormous amount of food. Giant squid. colossal squid, massive fish that never come near the surface. The abyss is, in a strange way, one of the richest hunting grounds on the planet. The prey down there has fewer predators, it has nowhere to run. And for the sperm whale, which needs enormous amounts of food to fuel that massive body, the deep is worth every risk. A sperm whale dives to around 7,000 feet on a typical hunt. To put that in perspective, the Empire State Building stands about 1,400 feet tall. Stack 5 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. That is where the whale goes, only going down instead of up, into crushing darkness instead of open sky. The dive takes time. The whale does not simply drop, it descends at a controlled pace, its enormous body adjusting to the increasing pressure as it goes. A single dive can last up to 2 hours. 2 hours without a breath of air. 2 hours in absolute darkness. 2 hours hunting something that will fight back the moment it is found. When the whale finally surfaces, it needs to breathe and recover. It floats at the surface for several minutes, sometimes longer, exhaling and inhaling through its single blowhole before it tips forward and vanishes again. Scientists tracked one sperm whale that made over 50 dives in a single day, 50 descents into the dark, 50 hunts. By the time that whale surfaced for the last time before sunset, it had spent the majority of the day in total blackness, thousands of feet below the surface, in conditions that would kill a human in minutes. What is remarkable is that the whale does this alone. When a sperm whale dives to hunt, the rest of the pod stays near the surface. The calves cannot make the deep dives yet. The mothers stay with them. The hunting whale descends by itself, into the dark, with nothing but its own biology and its sonar to keep it alive. There is something almost hard to process about that. An animal the size of a small building, dropping alone into a place with no light, no warmth and no backup, going after prey that can seriously injure it. And it does this every single day of its adult life. The body that makes this possible is one of the most extreme biological designs in the animal kingdom. It does not work the way you would expect. Its lungs are not its most important organ on the way down. Its muscles are. Its blood is. And a strange oil-filled organ in its massive head controls whether it sinks or rises. That organ is unlike anything else in nature, and what it does on the way down is the first thing that should surprise you. At 7,000 feet below the surface, the water pressure reaches around 3,000 pounds per square inch. To understand what that means, imagine placing a small car on top of your hand. That is roughly the force pressing against every single square inch of the whale's body at that depth. Every inch of skin, every organ, every bone. A human body would not survive the first few hundred feet. The pressure would squeeze the air out of your lungs, rupture blood vessels, and force nitrogen from your blood into your tissues in a process called the bends, a condition that causes excruciating pain and can kill within minutes. The sperm whale does not experience any of that. Its body is built for this. The first adaptation starts in the chest. A sperm whale's rib cage is not rigid like yours. The ribs connect to the spine and sternum with flexible cartilage instead of solid bone. As the whale descends and pressure builds, the rib cage simply folds inward. The lungs compress completely. They collapse on purpose. This is critical because compressed lungs hold almost no air, which means almost no nitrogen enters the bloodstream. The bends never happen. Here is the part that surprises most people. Because the lungs collapse during the dive, they are essentially useless below a few hundred feet. The whale does not breathe during the hunt. It cannot. So where does the oxygen come from? The muscles. Sperm whale muscle tissue is packed with a protein called myoglobin, which stores oxygen directly in the muscle fibers. The whale loads up on oxygen before the dive, and that oxygen sits inside the muscle tissue, available throughout the entire descent. This is why the flesh of a sperm whale is almost black in colour. Myoglobin is dark. The deeper you go into the muscle, the darker it gets. The whale's body is essentially a living oxygen tank. The blood carries an unusually high concentration of red blood cells as well, giving the whale an oxygen reserve in the bloodstream that is far larger, relative to body size, than anything a human carries. And the heart helps too. As the whale descends, its heart rate drops dramatically. The whale's circulation redirects blood away from non-essential organs and concentrates it around the brain and heart. The animal essentially powers down everything it does not need and keeps just the critical systems running, like a phone switching to low power mode, except the stakes are survival at 3,000 pounds per square inch. By the time the whale reaches hunting depth, it is operating on a completely different biological system than the one it uses at the surface. Its lungs are flat, its heart is beating slowly, its muscles are feeding it stored oxygen, its body temperature has adjusted to near freezing water, and it is still moving, still hunting, still aware. The pressure that should be destroying it is doing nothing. But keeping the body alive under pressure is only half the challenge. The other half is controlling depth itself. Going down is one thing. Knowing how deep to go and being able to rise again without racing to the surface and triggering dangerous pressure changes requires a completely different system. That system sits inside the whale's head, and it is full of oil. Picture a piece of raw meat from the grocery store. It is red, sometimes a deep red, because of blood. Now imagine that same tissue, but so dark it looks almost black, nearly purple in places. That is what you find inside a sperm whale's body. The darkness comes from myoglobin, a protein that binds and holds oxygen inside muscle tissue. Every animal with muscles has some myoglobin. Humans have it. Chickens have it, which is why dark meat is darker than white meat. The chicken's legs work constantly, so they need more oxygen stored locally. The breast, which barely moves in a domestic chicken, carries far less. The sperm whale's entire body works like those chicken legs, except at a scale that seems almost unreal. Every major muscle group in the whale is saturated with myoglobin. The oxygen stored in that tissue does not deplete during normal movement. It saves itself for the dive. When the whale tips its enormous body downward and the surface disappears above it, the lungs collapse and stop functioning. At that moment, every gram of oxygen the whale will use for the next 2 hours is already sitting inside its muscles, waiting. Scientists measured the myoglobin concentration in sperm whale tissue and found levels roughly 10 times higher than what you find in human muscle. 10 times. That gap is why a human passes out after a few minutes without air, and the whale hunts for 2 hours at 7,000 feet. The muscle oxygen system also explains something about how the whale dives. It does not need to rush. It does not need to frantically kick and push itself downward against time. The oxygen supply is internal and stable. The whale can descend at a steady, controlled pace, which actually helps manage pressure changes more safely. When the whale finally reaches hunting depth, the muscles have been providing steady oxygen for the entire descent. The animal arrives at the darkest, most dangerous place on Earth in full control of its body, with its senses active, its sonar ready, and its jaw prepared to snap shut around something much larger than most people would ever guess. There is another strange detail about this oxygen system that scientists only began to understand recently. The myoglobin in deep-diving whales carries an electrical charge that keeps individual proteins from sticking together even at extreme concentrations. In most animals, packing that much myoglobin into a cell would cause the proteins to clump and malfunction. The whale's myoglobin is engineered at the molecular level to prevent this. It functions perfectly at concentrations that would destroy the system in any other mammal. This means the sperm whale's oxygen storage is the result of millions of years of extremely precise evolutionary refinement. Every detail is calibrated, every system reinforces the others. And yet, none of this would work without something even stranger sitting inside the whale's head. The skull of a sperm whale is built around a cavity that holds an oil-filled organ the size of a bathtub. The oil inside it is not there for energy. The whale does not metabolize it. Instead, it uses that oil the way a submarine uses its ballast tanks, pumping heat in and out to change the oil's density and control whether the body sinks or rises. That organ has a name, and understanding it changes how you see the entire anatomy of this animal. The most unusual organ in the animal kingdom is hidden inside the sperm whale's enormous rectangular head. It is called the spermaceti organ, and it is filled with oil. Hundreds of gallons of it. This organ is so large it can account for a significant portion of the whale's total head volume. When whalers first discovered it centuries ago, they assumed the milky white liquid was something else entirely, which is actually where the name sperm whale comes from. They were wrong about what it was, but they were right that it was remarkable. For a long time, scientists assumed the spermaceti organ was primarily for producing sound. That part turned out to be true. But a separate theory emerged, and it explained something about the whale's behaviour that nothing else could. The whale can control the temperature of the oil inside the spermaceti organ. At body temperature, the oil stays liquid. When the whale draws cold seawater through its nasal passages and circulates it around the organ, the oil begins to solidify. It becomes denser. A denser head pulls the whale's nose downward and helps it descend without burning energy kicking against its own buoyancy. When the whale is ready to rise, it redirects warm blood back around the organ. The oil liquefies again. The whale becomes more buoyant. The ascent is easier. This system works like a ballast tank on a submarine, except the whale grows it from birth and operates it entirely with blood flow and body temperature. A submarine needs pumps and pressurized air tanks to adjust its buoyancy. The sperm whale does it with biology. The energy savings from this system are enormous. A whale that does not have to fight its own buoyancy on the way down conserves oxygen. Conserved oxygen means longer dives. Longer dives mean deeper hunting. Deeper hunting means access to prey that no other predator on Earth can reach. The spermaceti organ, in other words, is one of the reasons the sperm whale owns the abyss. But there is something strange about the descent that the ballast system reveals. Scientists tracking sperm whale dives discovered that the whales do not swim actively the entire way down. After the initial descent, many of them essentially glide. The body, with its ballast adjusted and its streamlined shape, falls through the water column with very little muscular effort. The whale rides the density change downward like a controlled free fall. This saves enormous amounts of energy and oxygen during the descent itself, leaving the whale's full reserves available for the hunt at the bottom. Now picture this. A 60-foot animal, silent, barely moving, falling through black water at a controlled pace. Its heart is slowing down. Its lungs are flat. Its muscles are quietly burning stored oxygen. The oil in its head is cooling, pulling it deeper. The temperature outside drops degree by degree, and somewhere below it, in the absolute dark at the bottom of that fall, something is waiting. The whale cannot see it yet. The darkness is total, but it is not hunting blind. It carries a weapon for the dark that operates on an entirely different level than eyesight, and what that weapon can do is something that still makes scientists stop and recalibrate what they thought they knew about biology. 600 feet down, the last trace of sunlight disappears. At that depth, the ocean is darker than the inside of a sealed room with every light off. There is no reference point, no direction, no visual information at all. An animal that relied on its eyes at this depth would be completely helpless. It would be as blind as if it had no eyes to begin with. The sperm whale has eyes. They are positioned on the sides of its enormous head, and they work reasonably well near the surface. But by the time the whale passes 600 feet on its way to 7,000, those eyes become useless. The darkness is simply too complete. So the whale switches systems. It activates a biological sonar so precise and so powerful that researchers who study it say no human-built technology has matched it for efficiency. The system does not use light, it uses sound. And what the whale can see with sound in the dark is in many ways more detailed than what you can see with your eyes in a lit room. Here is how it works at a basic level. Sound travels through water about 4 times faster than it travels through air. It also travels much farther. A click produced by the whale travels outward through the dark water, strikes an object, and bounces back. The time it takes to return tells the whale exactly how far away the object is. The shape of the returning echo tells it the size, texture, and density of whatever it hit. The whale can distinguish between a squid and a rock at enormous distances. It can detect the size of a fish from hundreds of feet away. It can track a moving target through total darkness at depth by updating its echo map in real time as the target moves. This system is called echolocation, the same principle bats use in the air. But the whale's version is orders of magnitude more powerful than anything a bat produces. The anatomy built around it is extraordinary. The whale forces air through a structure near the front of its head called the phonic lips, sometimes called monkey lips by researchers, which vibrate and produce the initial click. That click then travels into the spermaceti organ, which focuses it the way a lens focuses light, shaping the click into a tight directed beam that shoots forward into the dark. What comes back enters through the whale's lower jaw, which is filled with a fat channel that conducts sound directly to the inner ear. The jaw essentially works as a giant antenna, receiving echoes from every direction and feeding the information into the whale's brain. The brain then processes all of this in real time, constructing a 3-dimensional sound map of everything in the surrounding water. Moving targets, stationary objects, other whales, prey trying to escape. The system is so sensitive that scientists believe the whale can detect something the size of a beach ball from nearly a mile away in total darkness. A mile away, in the pitch black, with sound. And the sound that powers this system is something that requires its own chapter, because the numbers involved are difficult to process the first time you hear them. A sound loud enough to rupture your eardrums from over a football field away. That is what the sperm whale produces with every single click. The measurement is 236 decibels. For comparison, a jet engine at full power from a few feet away produces around 140 decibels. That is already painful enough to cause permanent hearing damage in seconds. The sperm whale's click does not register at 140. It registers at 236. The decibel scale works in a way that makes these numbers hard to compare directly. Every increase of 10 decibels represents a 10-fold increase in intensity, so the gap between 140 and 236 is not a small step. The sperm whale's click is billions of times more intense than a jet engine at close range. To be clear about what that means physically, sound at that intensity does not just travel through water, it strikes objects. It carries enough energy to physically affect tissue. Researchers have measured sperm whale clicks and found that at close range, the pressure wave from a single click is strong enough to stun small fish. The sound itself is a force. How does an animal produce something like that? It starts with the phonic lips, a pair of structures inside the whale's nasal system. The whale forces air at high pressure through these lips, and they snap shut and vibrate at extraordinary speed. The vibration generates the initial pulse of sound. On its own, that pulse is already powerful, but it is only the beginning. The pulse travels into the spermaceti organ, that massive oil-filled structure in the whale's head, which reflects and amplifies the sound. From there, it bounces between the front of the skull and the back wall of the organ, each bounce increasing the intensity before the focused beam fires forward into the water. The result is a directed sonic beam that travels through the dark ocean at extreme power. Now here is the detail that changes how you imagine a sperm whale hunt. The clicks come in sequences, and those sequences change depending on what the whale is doing. When a whale is simply navigating, it produces slow, spaced clicks called usual clicks. As it closes in on prey, the clicks accelerate into a rapid series called a creak, which sounds almost like a door with a rusty hinge opening very fast. During the creak phase, the whale is firing its sonar at maximum update speed, building a detailed real-time picture of a target that is trying to escape. When you hear a recording of a sperm whale creak, it does not sound like an ocean. It sounds mechanical, purposeful, like something computing. That brain interpreting all of this sound data is, by weight and by volume, the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived on Earth. A brain with a level of acoustic processing ability that researchers are still working to fully understand. And some scientists now believe the clicks are doing something beyond just mapping the environment. Something that, if proven, would change everything about how we understand this hunt. The whale is descending in the dark, its sonar is active. Its clicks are bouncing off something large, something moving fast, several hundred feet below it. Then something strange happens. The clicks accelerate. They tighten into a rapid, focused burst aimed directly at the target. And the target stops moving. Scientists have watched this sequence in acoustic recordings dozens of times. The prey goes still right at the moment the whale concentrates its sonar on it. And the question that researchers have been debating for years is whether that is a coincidence, or whether the whale is using its sound as a weapon to stun the squid before making physical contact. The theory is called acoustic stunning. The idea is that a directed sonar beam at 236 decibels, focused tightly on a soft-bodied animal like a squid, could physically disrupt the squid's nervous system or cause internal pressure damage that temporarily incapacitates it. The math supports the possibility. At those intensities, directed into a concentrated beam and fired at close range, the energy is sufficient to interfere with biological tissue. Squid have relatively simple nervous systems and no hard skull to protect their brain. A pressure wave of that magnitude hitting their body directly could, in theory, scramble their ability to move or escape. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Sperm whales catch squid that can swim at impressive speeds and change direction instantly. The whale is massive and relatively slow to turn. Catching a healthy, fully alert giant squid in a straight race should be difficult for an animal the size of a city bus. Catching a temporarily stunned one is a different story. Some researchers point to the physical condition of squid found in whale stomachs. Many are swallowed completely intact with almost no bite marks, suggesting the whale engulfed them in a single movement without a prolonged struggle. A squid that was fighting at full capacity would be much harder to swallow cleanly. Other researchers argue the evidence is too thin. They point out that squid may simply freeze in the presence of a strong sonar signal the way some prey animals freeze in bright light, and that this could be a stress response rather than the result of any physical damage. They argue the whale's jaw is efficient enough to catch fast prey without needing to stun it first. The debate is ongoing, and the answer matters. Because if the sperm whale is using sound as a weapon, it would make this animal the only creature on Earth known to hunt by generating a biological shockwave, a living sonic cannon descending into the dark to fire at its prey before ever touching it. For now, the acoustic stun theory remains unproven, but it has never been ruled out either. Every time a researcher records a whale creak sequence followed by a sudden stop in prey movement, the question gets harder to dismiss. What we know for certain is that the whale finds its prey in the dark, that it closes in with incredible efficiency, and that what waits at the end of that descent is one of the most heavily armed animals in the ocean. An animal that does not have bones, does not have armour, and has never needed either. For centuries, sailors called it the Kraken, a monster from the deep that could wrap its arms around a full ship and pull it under, something so large and so violent that it lived only in stories told by frightened men who had seen something in the water they could not explain. The monster was real. The stories got the details wrong, but the animal behind them was always there. The giant squid lives in temperate and tropical ocean waters across the globe. It spends most of its life in the deep ocean, somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 feet below the surface, in the dim, cold water just above the midnight zone. It does not come to the surface. It does not need light. It is perfectly designed for a world where the pressure is high and the darkness is total. And it is enormous. A full-grown giant squid can reach 43 feet from the tip of its mantle to the end of its two longest feeding tentacles. That is longer than a school bus. The body alone, not counting the tentacles, can be several feet long and as thick around as a fire hydrant. The animal can weigh close to 700 pounds. It has 8 arms arranged around its beak, each one lined with suckers. 2 longer tentacles extend beyond the arms, tipped with wider pads also covered in suckers. These tentacles move fast. They can shoot outward to grab prey in a fraction of a second. Here is the part that changes how you picture this animal. The suckers are armed. Each suction cup on the giant squid's arms and tentacles is ringed with a circle of tiny curved teeth made of a hard biological material similar to fingernails. When a sucker locks onto something and the squid pulls, those teeth rotate inward. They dig in, they hold. When a sperm whale grabs a giant squid, the squid wraps those armed tentacles around the whale's head immediately. Every contact point between the squid and the whale is a sucker biting down and locking in place. The whale must shake, crush, and overwhelm the squid while the squid's teeth are carving circles into its skin. Those circles stay forever. Peeled over, pale against the darker skin. Permanent proof that the squid was there. The giant squid also has the largest eyes of any animal on Earth relative to head size. Each eye is roughly the size of a dinner plate, about 10 inches across. In the near-total darkness of the deep ocean, those massive eyes detect the faintest traces of bioluminescence, the tiny flashes of light produced by other deep-sea creatures. The squid uses those flashes to navigate and hunt in conditions where ordinary eyes would see nothing. When the sperm whale descends into the squid's territory, it enters a zone where the squid has existed far longer in evolutionary time. The squid knows the dark, it knows how to use it, and the giant squid, enormous as it is actually the smaller of the 2 main species the whale regularly hunts. What lives farther south, in the freezing waters around Antarctica, is heavier, wider, and armed with something far more destructive than simple toothed suckers. Every sucker on a giant squid's arms is a trap. Picture the end of a suction cup you might use to hang something on a glass window. Now picture that same cup with a ring of curved, razor-sharp teeth along the inside edge. When the cup seals against something soft, those teeth bite inward. The seal and the teeth work together. The cup holds. The teeth grip. The harder the prey pulls away, the deeper the teeth dig. The giant squid carries hundreds of these structures across its 8 arms and 2 longer feeding tentacles. When it latches onto prey, every point of contact becomes a locking mechanism. Pulling free does not release the grip. Pulling free makes it worse. For the sperm whale, this creates a specific problem during a hunt. The whale's goal is to pin the squid inside its narrow lower jaw and crush or swallow it. But before the whale can close its jaw, the squid has already reached out. The tentacles find the whale's face. They find the skin around its jaw, its eyes, the soft tissue near its blowhole. The suckers attach. The teeth bite down. The whale is biting the squid, while the squid is simultaneously carving into the whale's face. A single adult sperm whale can carry the scars of hundreds, sometimes thousands of these encounters. The circular marks from squid suckers cluster around the mouth and face, exactly where you would expect if the squid was defending itself by grabbing the nearest part of the whale it could reach. Scientists have studied these scar patterns carefully. The size of the circles tells them the approximate size of the squid that made them. Larger circles mean larger squid. Some whales carry circles so large that the squid that made them would have been bigger than any specimen ever captured or measured by researchers. This is one of the most unsettling implications of the scar record. The scars are evidence. And some of the evidence points to animals that, based on the circular marks they left behind, would exceed the known maximum size for giant squid by a significant margin. The ocean may hold squid larger than any scientist has ever documented, and those scars from the giant squid, as serious as they are actually the less severe injuries. The colossal squid does not use toothed suckers. It uses something fundamentally different, something that does not simply grip and bite, something that rotates and tears. When you understand what the colossal squid carries on its tentacles and what those hooks do when they make contact, the scar patterns on older sperm whales start to make a different kind of sense. Because those long, jagged gouges running across the whale's skin were never made by suckers. The colossal squid does not have a famous name in the same way the giant squid does. It does not appear in old sailor myths. It has no nickname. For most of human history, it did not exist in any story at all, because almost no one knew it existed. It lives in the Southern Ocean, the ring of freezing water that surrounds Antarctica. Down there, in water that sits just above the freezing point of salt water, in darkness and under enormous pressure, the colossal squid spends its entire life. Scientists confirmed the colossal squid's existence in the early 20th century, initially from beak fragments found inside the stomachs of sperm whales. For decades, the only evidence of this animal was fragments of its most indestructible part, the beak, recovered from inside predators. The squid itself was almost never seen whole. When researchers finally did examine complete specimens, what they found was not what they expected. The colossal squid has a shorter body than the giant squid, but it is significantly wider, more massive through the middle, built like a barrel compared to the giant squid's more elongated shape. A large colossal squid can weigh over 1,100 pounds. That is heavier than a full-grown dairy cow. In total length, it can reach around 46 feet when the tentacles are fully extended. But the weight and the length are secondary to the weapons. Instead of toothed suckers, the colossal squid carries hooks on its tentacles. These are the structure that makes this animal different from every other squid species. Each hook is hard, curved and pointed. They line the tentacle pads in rows. A large colossal squid carries between 22 and 25 of these hooks on each feeding tentacle. The hooks rotate. This is what separates them from anything else. A toothed sucker grips and holds. A colossal squid hook grips, then turns. The hook pivots on its base and digs deeper as the tentacle pulls. It is not a passive grip. It is an active, tearing motion. When a colossal squid wraps a tentacle around a sperm whale's face and pulls, those hooks spin inward. They open channels in the skin. Long, curved gouges that do not look like the clean circles left by giant squid suckers. They look like claw marks, because functionally, that is what they are. The sperm whales that hunt colossal squid carry a specific kind of scar pattern. The circles are still there from the arms, but running between them and across the whale's face are longer marks. Irregular, deep-thigh kind of marks left by something that was not just holding on, but actively digging in and tearing as it went. A colossal squid beak is also considerably stronger than the giant squid's. Researchers measured one and calculated it was powerful enough to cut through heavy steel cable. The same beak that cuts steel cable is aimed at the whale's head when the fight begins. Neither of these animals is a passive prey item. They are armed, large, strong, and capable of seriously injuring a sperm whale during a hunt. And the place where these fights happen removes every advantage the whale might otherwise have. There is a part of the colossal squid's anatomy that never digests. Everything else breaks down. The soft tissue, the muscle, the skin, the tentacles. Once the sperm whale's stomach acids get to work, all of it dissolves. The whale absorbs the nutrients and moves on. The beak survives. A cephalopod beak is made of a hard, layered material similar in structure to a human fingernail, but far denser and far tougher. It is shaped like a parrot's beak, curved and hooked at the tip, with a cross-section that concentrates force at a fine point. When a squid uses its beak to bite, the curved shape directs the full closing force of the muscle behind it to a small area of contact. The pressure that generates is extraordinary. Researchers who tested a colossal squid beak found it could cut through heavy steel cable without deforming. The same beak can bite through the thick blubber layer of a sperm whale. It can bite chunks of flesh out of an animal 10 times its own size. During the hunt at depth, the squid aims its beak at the whale's face. It targets the soft skin around the eyes, it targets the blubber, it tries to bite into the area near the blowhole or the sensitive tissue around the jaw. The whale's blubber is thick, often over a foot deep, and it absorbs enormous punishment. But the colossal squid's beak is not stopped by blubber. It cuts through. The whale kills the squid. The squid's soft tissue dissolves over time in the stomach. The beak does not dissolve. It settles to the bottom of the stomach and stays there. Over years of hunting, a sperm whale accumulates beaks. Dozens of them at first, then hundreds, then thousands. Scientists have opened the stomach of a single adult sperm whale and counted 18,000 squid beaks inside. 18,000. If each one represents a successful hunt, that is 18,000 separate descents into the dark, 18,000 battles, 18,000 squid caught and swallowed. The beaks come in different sizes. Scientists can measure each one and estimate the size of the squid it came from. They can sort them by species, by approximate age, and by size class. A whale's stomach becomes a record of its hunting history, preserved in keratin at the bottom of its digestive tract. But 18,000 sharp, hard beaks sitting inside a stomach are not harmless. They scratch, they poke, they press against the stomach lining and irritate the tissue. The whale's body responds to this constant low-level injury the way many bodies respond to a persistent irritant. It creates something to contain the damage. A waxy dark substance begins to form in the whale's lower intestines, secreted in response to the sharp beaks pressing against soft tissue. This substance coats the edges of the beaks, slowly encasing them, and in the process it combines with other waste material into a dense lump that the whale eventually expels. That lump, floating in the ocean, curing slowly in the salt and sun, becomes something that humans have been obsessing over for centuries without fully understanding where it came from. And its value, once it washes up on a beach, is almost impossible to explain without knowing what created it. Every scar on a sperm whale's face is proof that something happened. Something violent, something fast, something that took place in conditions no camera, no submarine, and no research team has ever successfully observed in real time. Scientists can measure the scars, they can count the beaks, they can track the acoustic signals of a whale deep in a hunt. But the actual fight, the moment a 60-foot whale and a 1,000-pound squid armed with rotating hooks make contact in absolute darkness at 7,000 feet, has never been seen by human eyes. The deep ocean is the last truly unobserved place on Earth. The pressure at 7,000 feet destroys most camera housings. The darkness requires lights, and lights create heat and attract the wrong things. Submarines capable of reaching those depths are large, slow, and produce enormous noise that disrupts any behavior they are trying to observe. Even the quietest deep-sea submersibles change the environment simply by arriving. A handful of research programs have placed camera systems on sperm whales using suction cup mounted tags. These tags record sound, depth, acceleration, and sometimes video. They capture the whale's click sequences and the acoustic echoes of prey nearby. They have shown researchers the approach, the acceleration, and the final descent to hunting depth. Then the recording shows the whale in a rapid sequence of movements, quick changes in direction, accelerations, sudden decelerations, a burst of activity that lasts minutes. And then the whale slows. The movement settles. And the creak clicks fade. The fight is in there, somewhere, in the data. but the data cannot show it. The cameras that have captured anything useful show flashes, fragments, a tentacle. A blur of movement. Nothing complete. What we know about the battle itself comes from secondary evidence. The scars on living whales, the condition of squid found in stomachs, the acoustic signatures recorded during hunts, and a small amount of inference from what we know about both animals. Here is what that evidence suggests. When the whale closes the last 100 feet on a giant squid, the squid detects the approach through its enormous eyes and its sensitivity to pressure changes in the water. It tries to escape. The whale accelerates. The creak intensifies. Contact happens fast. The whale drives its narrow lower jaw toward the squid's body. The squid, in the same instant, throws its tentacles outward toward the largest thing approaching it, which is the whale's face. The suckers or hooks find the whale's skin and lock in. The beak comes forward. Both animals are now attached to each other in complete darkness, at a depth where no outside force will intervene, where the outcome depends entirely on which one breaks first. The whale has mass on its side. The squid has reach, multiple points of grip, a cutting beak, and the ability to ink the water, though the ink is less effective in the deep than at shallower depths. The fight ends when it ends. The whale surfaces hours later, sometimes with fresh wounds, always with circular marks and hook gouges it will carry for the rest of its life. The squid does not surface at all. But the story does not end when the whale swallows, because what happens inside the whale afterward produces something that has washed up on beaches across the world and confused and fascinated humans for thousands of years. The squid is not a passive animal. It does not freeze when the whale arrives. It does not simply accept what is happening. It fights with a strategy, or at least something that functions like one, driven by instinct refined over millions of years of being hunted in the dark. The squid's first response to a threat is usually to move. It propels itself by drawing water into its mantle cavity and forcing it out through a siphon, a jet propulsion system that can generate quick bursts of speed. In open water with time to react, a squid can cover distance fast. It can also change direction instantly by rotating the siphon. But at 7,000 feet with a sonar beam painting it every fraction of a second and a 60-foot animal closing the gap, escape by speed alone runs out of options quickly. So the squid does something else. When physical contact becomes unavoidable, it turns toward the threat. This is the opposite of what most prey animals do. Most prey animals try to flee until the last possible moment. The giant squid and the colossal squid, when cornered, redirect their tentacles toward the attacker's face. The face of a sperm whale has specific targets. The eyes sit on either side of the enormous head, set back slightly from the blunt forehead. They are recessed but still exposed. A squid tentacle reaching the eye of a whale could cause serious injury, possibly blinding the whale in that eye. A blind whale cannot hunt effectively. The blowhole sits on top of the whale's head. It is the whale's only connection to air. The whale cannot breathe through its mouth. The blowhole is the single opening through which all the whale's oxygen enters and exits. A squid tentacle across the blowhole does not close it permanently, but it creates resistance, it creates pain, and it may disrupt the whale's timing on the ascent. The squid's beak, meanwhile, goes for flesh. It targets the soft skin around the whale's mouth and jaw, the areas where the blubber is thinnest and the underlying tissue is most accessible. It opens wounds. It removes pieces. It creates damage that accumulates. The whale's defense against all of this is its thick skin. Sperm whale skin and blubber combined can be over a foot deep in places. The blubber absorbs enormous punishment. The circular sucker scars and hook gouges on a whale's face look dramatic, but most of them do not penetrate deeply enough to cause life-threatening injury to a healthy adult. The eyes and the blowhole are the exception. Those targets are vulnerable in a way the rest of the body is not. Researchers have documented blind sperm whales still living and apparently still hunting successfully, suggesting the whale's sonar system is capable enough to compensate even for the loss of vision. The acoustic map the whale builds with its clicks may, in practice, give it more hunting information than its eyes ever did in the deep, but every fight still leaves evidence. The whale rises from the dark carrying its wounds, its face tells the story, and the jaw that closes around the squid to end the fight is built for exactly this kind of work, narrow, lined with teeth, and designed to clamp down with a force that very little in the ocean can resist. The whale does not need to be elegant. It is 60 feet long and weighs over 50 tons. It carries over a foot of blubber beneath its skin. Its muscles power the largest jaw of any toothed animal alive. When the whale closes in on a squid in the dark, its strategy is essentially the same one a freight train uses. Keep moving. Apply force. Do not stop. The lower jaw of the sperm whale is one of the most distinctive anatomical features of any animal in the ocean. It is narrow. Surprisingly narrow for the size of the animal. The upper jaw barely has any teeth at all, just pits where teeth would fit. The lower jaw carries all the teeth, usually between 18 and 26 on each side, large conical structures that can be over 7 inches long and weigh more than 2 pounds each. When the whale snaps this jaw shut, the force applied is enormous. The narrow shape concentrates that force into a small area, similar to how a pointed heel applies more pressure to a floor than a flat one, even at the same weight. The lower jaw is essentially a trap, long and lined, designed to close around something cylindrical and hold it. A giant squid's mantle body is cylindrical. The jaw is built for exactly this shape, but the whale rarely uses its jaw on the initial contact with the squid. The initial contact is a collision. The whale's head, driven by 50 tons of moving mass, hits the squid first. The blunt rectangular forehead of the sperm whale functions as a battering ram. The impact alone is significant. It disrupts the squid's orientation, knocks it sideways in the water column, and reduces its ability to respond with coordinated tentacle movements. Then the jaw comes down. Sperm whales sometimes lose teeth during hunts, teeth broken or knocked out during violent encounters with large squid. The whale continues hunting anyway. Researchers have documented multiple toothless or nearly toothless whales in apparently healthy condition, still feeding, still diving, suggesting the jaw structure and the suction of the mouth cavity can still capture prey even without a full set of teeth. The blubber layer that covers the whale's entire body also plays a direct role in the fight. When squid suckers or hooks attach to the whale's skin, they are biting into a thick, tough, rubbery material that absorbs the grip and limits how deeply the teeth or hooks can penetrate toward underlying muscle or organs. The blubber is essentially armour, flexible, self-healing armour that covers the animal from nose to tail. The combination of mass, momentum, jaw design and blubber coverage means the whale absorbs and delivers punishment at levels no squid can ultimately match. The squid's hooks and beak cause real injury, but they rarely cause fatal injury to a healthy adult whale. The whale's jaw, once it closes, ends the fight. Every adult sperm whale alive today has won every fight it has ever had in the dark. Every single one. The ones that lost did not come back up. That record of survival is written on their skin, and some of that skin tells a story even more dramatic than the scars themselves suggest. Turn a photograph of an adult sperm whale's head and look closely at the skin. The surface is not smooth. It is covered. Circular marks of varying sizes cluster around the mouth and jaw, some barely visible, others large enough to see clearly from a distance. Running between them are longer marks, curved and irregular, the kind that come from something that gripped and then dragged. Some marks are faded, old wounds from decades-old fights that have fully healed over. Others are still dark against the skin. Recent encounters from hunts carried out in the weeks before the photograph was taken Each mark is a record of physical contact with something armed and alive in the dark. Scientists have been using these scar patterns for decades as a tool for understanding sperm whale biology. The marks are stable enough to serve as identifiers. Individual whales can be recognized by the specific arrangement of scars on their faces, the way a person can be recognized by a distinctive birthmark or scar. Researchers assign catalogue numbers to individual whales and track them across years, sometimes across decades, returning to the same animals to photograph them and compare new scars to old ones. What this long-term tracking reveals is a continuous history of conflict. A young adult sperm whale carries relatively few scars. An older animal, say one in its 30s or 40s, is covered in them. The accumulation over a lifetime of hunting reveals just how frequent these encounters are, and how relentlessly the whale descends into those battles. Some whales carry marks that stand out from the rest. Circles larger than a dinner plate. Gouges wider and deeper than anything a standard-sized giant squid could produce. These anomalies have quietly fascinated researchers for years, because the physics of what left them suggests the animal responsible was significantly larger than anything ever captured or photographed. There is no specimen to confirm this. The evidence lives on the whale's skin, not in any laboratory collection. But the mathematics are consistent. If you measure a sucker scar and calculate the size of the squid arm that would have produced it, you arrive at an animal that, by every metric, exceeds the documented maximum size for the species. The ocean may be hiding something larger than any squid currently in the record books, and the scar record points to another pattern as well. The placement of scars on the face is not random. They concentrate in specific zones, the area around the mouth, the skin near the eyes, the ridge of the jaw, exactly where a squid would be reaching during a fight. The distribution is so consistent across individual whales, across different oceans, across different decades, that it reveals the fight has a structure. The squid always goes for the same places. The whale always engages the same way. A choreography of violence in the dark, repeated tens of thousands of times across the species, recorded in permanent marks on every surviving animal. And some of those marks become part of something even more personal. Individual researchers who spend years with specific whale populations come to know individual animals by their scars, the way you might recognize an old friend by a familiar detail. The whale with the two large circles near the right eye, the one with the deep diagonal gouge across the lower jaw. Some of those whales carry something else, a behavioural quirk, a way of sleeping, a specific pattern of movement that researchers have documented alongside the scars. And what scientists discovered about how sperm whales sleep is the kind of detail that stops a conversation completely. Most animals that scientists study in the wild are difficult to tell apart. A pod of 50 sperm whales, all roughly the same size and colour, circling at the surface in open ocean, presents a serious identification challenge. Traditional tagging methods require close contact, darting, attachment of physical markers. These are stressful for the animal and logistically difficult in deep open water. The sperm whale solved this problem for researchers without being asked. Its scars are permanent, they are specific, and in many cases they are large enough to see clearly from a research vessel moving alongside the whale. Photo identification using photographs of natural markings to identify individual animals has been used with dolphins, humpback whales, and orca pods for decades. With sperm whales, the method works exceptionally well. The combination of scar patterns, fin shape, and the specific arrangement of marks around the jaw creates a profile for each individual that does not change significantly over time once the animal reaches adulthood. The Dominica Sperm Whale Project, which has been tracking sperm whale families in the Caribbean for over 2 decades, maintains a catalogue of individually identified animals. Each entry includes photographs, behavioural notes, family relationships, and a history of observed encounters going back years. Researchers can pull up a whale they last saw 4 years ago and match it to a new photograph within seconds based on its scar profile. This level of individual identification has produced something unexpected. long-term behavioural data on specific animals followed across their actual lifetimes, and some of what that data shows is remarkable. Whales that were photographed as young adults, relatively lightly scarred, have been re-photographed a decade later, covered in new marks. The accumulation rate allows researchers to estimate how frequently a whale is engaging in deep hunts that result in physical contact with large squid. For some individuals, the rate suggests multiple scarring events per week throughout their adult lives. The scar record also captured something disturbing in a handful of cases. Whales with injuries from sources other than squid. Marks consistent with boat strike propellers, long parallel cuts running across the body. Entanglement wounds from fishing line, thin marks that go deep because the line cuts through blubber as the whale moves. These are human origin injuries layered on top of the ancient record of the deep hunts. The whale carries all of it at once, the prehistoric story of a predator that has been diving into the abyss for millions of years, and the modern story of an ocean increasingly shared with industrial shipping and fishing nets. There is one specific scar pattern that researchers look for when they want to understand the most extreme individual hunters. The largest circular marks. The deepest hook gouges. These belong to the whales that regularly engage the biggest squid, the animals pushing to the deepest water and coming up against the most heavily armed prey. A few individuals in various research catalogues carry marks so large and so deep that the squid responsible, if the size calculation from the scar diameter holds, would represent an animal outside any currently documented size range for its species. The ocean keeps that secret carefully. The evidence is on the whale's skin. The source stays 7,000 feet below, and when those same whales surface after a hunt, they sometimes do something that researchers stumbled onto entirely by accident, in a way that changed how everyone understood what these animals actually do between dives. Open a sperm whale's stomach and you would not find what you expect. No half-digested flesh. No visible chunks of squid. The soft tissue breaks down fast, processed by stomach acid strong enough to dissolve muscle and skin within hours of being swallowed. By the time researchers examine a deceased whale, the contents of the stomach look like a dark, dense slurry. But at the bottom of that slurry, hard and intact, and completely unaffected by the acids that dissolved everything else, are the beaks. Thousands of them. Scientists opened the stomach of one adult sperm whale and counted 18,000 squid beaks. 18,000 individual beaks from 18,000 individual squid accumulated over that animal's lifetime of hunting. If you laid those beaks out end to end, the line would stretch for nearly a mile. Each beak represents a completed hunt, a descent into the dark, a chase in total blackness, a fight, a kill. 18,000 times. The number becomes more vivid when you break it down. A sperm whale typically lives between 60 and 70 years. Remove the first several years when the animal is too young to make deep solo dives. That leaves roughly 5 to 6 decades of active hunting. 18,000 hunts across 50 years works out to nearly one successful deep hunt per day, every day, for half a century. The whale does not take days off. It does not have seasons where it skips the deep dives. Every day it descends. Every day it finds something in the dark and brings it back up in its stomach. The beaks also vary in size. A stomach holding 18,000 beaks contains squid from multiple size classes, from smaller animals caught near the upper boundary of the midnight zone to massive specimens taken at the greatest depths. The size distribution inside a single stomach tells researchers something about the whale's hunting range across depth, and how its targets change as the animal ages and grows more capable. Larger, older whales tend to carry a higher proportion of large beaks. This makes sense. A bigger whale can dive deeper, sustain a longer hunt, and overpower a larger squid. The beak record inside the stomach tracks the whale's entire hunting career, from smaller prey taken when it was young and still building skill, to the largest squid in the ocean taken in the animal's prime. And those beaks, sitting inside the stomach in enormous numbers, are not simply stored records. They are a constant presence against the stomach lining, hard, curved, sharp-tipped objects pressing against soft tissue every time the whale moves, every time the stomach contracts. Over years, the accumulation of this irritation changes something inside the whale's body. The digestive tract responds to the repeated contact with sharp edges, the way a biological system often responds to persistent low-level injury. It starts building a barrier, not quickly. The process takes time and happens gradually, deep inside the intestines where the sharp beaks finally migrate after leaving the stomach. But what that barrier eventually produces, and what happens to it after the whale expels it into the open ocean, connects the deepest hunting animal on Earth to the most expensive perfume factories in the world. That connection is one of the stranger facts in all of biology, and it starts with 18,000 sharp edges grinding against living tissue. The beaks do not stay in the stomach. After the stomach acids finish with the soft tissue, the remaining hard material moves deeper into the digestive tract. The squid beaks travel through the intestines, pushed along by the same muscular contractions that move everything else through the system. And as they travel, they do what sharp objects always do inside soft tissue. They scratch. They press. They irritate. The whale's intestinal lining is not designed to handle thousands of sharp, curved, dense objects grinding against it continuously. No animal's gut lining is. The tissue responds to this chronic irritation the way biological tissue often does when it cannot eliminate a source of damage. It secretes a protective coating. The substance that forms is waxy, dense, and dark in colour when it first develops inside the animal. It is produced by cells in the intestinal lining and builds up around the sharp beak edges, slowly encasing them, rounding off the points, reducing the contact damage. Over time, this waxy material combines with other undigested material, binds together, and forms a solid mass inside the lower intestine. The whale eventually expels this mass. It enters the ocean as a dark, dense lump, sometimes the size of a football, sometimes significantly larger. The largest lumps ever recovered weighed over 200 pounds. Once in the ocean, something changes. The waxy substance begins to cure. Salt water, sun exposure, and oxidation transform it over months and years. The dark colour fades. The texture changes from dense and waxy to something almost smooth. The smell, which is intensely unpleasant when fresh, evolves into something very different. Aged and cured, the substance develops a complex, earthy, musky scent that perfumers describe as impossible to replicate artificially. This substance is ambergris. For centuries, people finding lumps of ambergris on beaches had no idea what they were looking at. The material looked like a strange pale rock. It smelled unlike anything else. It floated. It burned with a clean flame. Ancient texts describe it being found in the ocean and on coastlines across the world, and cultures from the Arab world to medieval Europe assigned it various mystical properties. Some believed it rose from the ocean floor. Some believed it was a type of sea foam that hardened over time. The actual origin, the digestive byproduct of an enormous deep-diving predator responding to the sharp beaks of its prey, was not confirmed until much later. What drove the obsession with ambergris was practical. Perfumers discovered that it functions as a fixative, a substance that binds other scents and makes them last far longer on skin. A perfume made with ambergris does not fade in an hour. It lingers for days. The scent clings. This property, combined with the extreme rarity of the substance and the impossibility of producing it artificially at the same quality, made ambergris extraordinarily valuable. A single kilogram of high-quality ambergris can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. A large lump found on a beach has made ordinary people wealthy overnight. All of it begins with a squid beak pressing against an intestinal wall in total darkness 7,000 feet underwater. The hunt creates the injury creates the coating, the ocean does the rest. And some of those coated beaks carry a story even the ambergris cannot tell, about a sound the whale may be using to stun its prey before the fight even begins. A fisherman in Oman walks along the beach after a storm and finds something unusual in the wet sand. It is pale grey, slightly waxy to the touch. It is heavier than it looks. It smells strange, not rotten, not clean, somewhere between the two, earthy and deep and unlike anything the man has smelled before. He picks it up, carries it home, and asks around. What he found is worth more than most people earn in a year. The global market for ambergris has operated for centuries, and in certain parts of the world it still operates actively today. The substance is legal to trade in most countries outside the United States and Australia, where laws protecting sperm whales restrict its sale. In markets in the Gulf states, in parts of Europe, and in specialty fragrance communities worldwide, genuine aged ambergris commands extraordinary prices. A kilogram of high-grade ambergris, meaning material that has cured in the ocean for at least several years and developed the complex earthy scent that perfumers value, can sell for $40,000 or more. Larger pieces sell for proportionally higher amounts. A single lump recovered from a beach in the Maldives sold at auction for over $300,000. The people who find it often do not recognize it immediately. Fresh ambergris smells foul. It is dark and dense and unpleasant. The transformation that makes it valuable takes time in the ocean, sometimes years, sometimes decades. A lump expelled by a whale in the Southern Ocean might drift on currents for 10 years before washing ashore on a beach in New Zealand, by which point the original dark waxy material has become pale, smooth, and incredibly valuable. Counterfeits exist. People sell pale rocks, wax lumps, or grey clay as ambergris to buyers who do not know the difference. The tests used to confirm authenticity include burning a small sample which should melt cleanly and produce a specific smell, and examining the interior for squid beak fragments, the biological signature that confirms the origin. Those beak fragments inside the ambergris are the direct link between this valuable substance and the battle it came from. The beaks embedded in the ambergris are the same colossal or giant squid beaks that irritated the whale's intestines and triggered the protective secretion in the first place. Cut open a piece of ambergris, and you sometimes find a beak preserved inside, still intact, still identifiable by species and size. A piece of the fight, preserved in something worth more than gold by weight. The perfume industry moved away from natural ambergris in the 20th century, largely due to scarcity and cost, and synthetic replacements called ambroxide and ambroxan are now used in most commercial fragrances. But connoisseurs and high-end perfumers still seek the genuine material, arguing the synthetic versions approximate the scent, but fail to replicate the specific fixative properties that made the original so sought after. The whale produces ambergris continuously as long as it keeps hunting. Some researchers estimate a large, actively hunting sperm whale produces a few pounds of ambergris per year, though most of it likely dissolves or sinks before curing fully. The rare pieces that survive and wash ashore are the ones that started the centuries of confusion. And somewhere in the same ocean where this substance drifts, scientists are still arguing about whether the whale's most powerful tool does something even stranger than create a map of the deep. The whale is 100 feet from the squid. Its creek clicks are firing at maximum speed, dozens of clicks per second, each one a focused beam of sound aimed directly at the squid's body. The sonar return tells the whale the exact position, size, and movement of its target. The whale adjusts its angle. It accelerates. And then, the squid stops moving. This sequence has been captured in acoustic recordings from suction cup tags placed on hunting sperm whales. The pattern appears repeatedly. The creak intensifies. Then the prey goes still. Then the whale makes contact. The acoustic stun theory rests on a straightforward physical argument. A sound beam at 236 decibels carries significant energy. When that energy is focused into a tight beam and directed at a soft-bodied animal with a simple nervous system and no protective skull, the pressure wave passing through the animal's tissue could theoretically disrupt nerve function and cause temporary paralysis. The numbers support the possibility. researchers have calculated the energy density of a focused sperm whale click at close range and found it falls within the range that laboratory experiments on soft tissue have shown to produce measurable disruption to cellular function. The clicks are powerful enough, physically, to do biological damage at close range. The behavioural evidence adds to the picture. Multiple studies of squid recovered from whale stomachs noted that many large squid, including animals that would have been capable of serious resistance, appeared to have been swallowed with minimal struggle. The tentacles showed sucker marks on the whale's skin, confirming contact was made, but the degree of injury on some whales was lower than expected for the size of squid involved. One team of researchers reviewed dozens of acoustic recordings from tagging studies and documented a consistent drop in prey movement at the moment the creak sequence reached its peak intensity and closest range. They could not confirm the mechanism, but the timing was consistent enough to publish as a significant correlation. The counter-argument remains strong. Some researchers point out that many prey animals freeze when a large predator is very close, a behaviour driven by stress rather than physical disruption. A squid detecting the pressure of a 60-foot animal bearing down on it at close range might simply be overwhelmed and stop moving out of a kind of sensory overload. The sound might have nothing to do with it. Others argue that if acoustic stunning were a reliable hunting tool, evolution would have pushed the whale to develop even more powerful click capability over millions of years, and the fact that the click power has apparent limits suggests it serves primarily as a sensing tool. The debate has not been settled. What makes it genuinely fascinating is that both sides agree the whale's click is powerful enough to cause physical effects in nearby tissue. The disagreement is about whether those effects are intentional, whether the whale targets the squid with acoustic force on purpose, or whether the disruption is a side effect of the same sonar system that maps the environment. The whale cannot answer that question. It simply descends. It finds its target. It fires its clicks. And the squid, in many documented cases, stops moving at exactly the right moment. Between hunts, on the surface, the whale does something so unexpected that a research team discovered it entirely by accident and spent several confused minutes wondering if the animals were dead. In 2008, a research team working off the coast of northern Chile was navigating between study sites when they encountered something unusual. A group of sperm whales was at the surface. That was normal. Sperm whales surface regularly to breathe. But these whales were not moving. They were not breathing actively. They were floating in a tight cluster, each animal oriented vertically in the water, nose pointed upward, tail hanging down. Their blowholes were barely clearing the surface. They were completely motionless. The team approached cautiously, assuming the whales might be sick or injured. They cut the engines and drifted closer. The whales still did not move. The researchers sat in silence for several minutes, unsure what they were observing. Then one whale slowly drifted into the side of their boat. It woke up. The entire group surfaced fully, took several rapid breaths, and dove. The researchers compared notes and eventually confirmed what they had witnessed. They had found sperm whales sleeping. The discovery was significant because almost nothing was known about how sperm whales slept. It had been assumed they rested horizontally at the surface, the way many cetaceans do. The vertical orientation, nose up, tail down, floating in a tight, silent cluster, was completely unexpected. Further research confirmed this behaviour across multiple populations. Sperm whales sleep vertically, typically in groups for periods of around 12 minutes at a time. They close both eyes, their body functions drop to a minimum. The blowholes stay near the surface passively, allowing the whales to breathe without making conscious effort. The cluster formation during sleep mirrors, interestingly, the defensive rosette formation the pod uses against killer whales. The whales gather close together, oriented the same direction. Whether the sleeping cluster provides some passive defensive benefit is something researchers are still discussing. 12 minutes seems like a short sleep. But sperm whales appear to sleep multiple times across a day, in brief sessions rather than one long period. The total time spent sleeping is estimated at around 7% of their daily lives. For an animal that dives for hours and hunts without pause, 7% seems almost impossibly small. The vertical float position also makes physical sense. A sperm whale's body, with the enormous heavy head and the spermaceti organ that can be adjusted for density, may rest naturally in a slightly nose-up orientation when the animal relaxes buoyancy control. The sleep posture may require less conscious effort to maintain than a horizontal float would. What the sleeping pods look like from a distance, especially from above, has been described by researchers who have seen them as unsettling. A cluster of enormous animals, motionless, vertical, barely breaking the surface, no sound, no movement. Like pillars standing in open ocean. The animal behind those pillars has a brain that, by weight and volume, exceeds every other animal that has ever lived on this planet. And what that brain does with all the information it processes, from sonar to social bonds to cultural memory, is something science is only beginning to understand. 20 pounds. That is how much a sperm whale's brain weighs. 20 pounds of neural tissue, roughly the size of a large watermelon, packed inside the massive rectangular head alongside the spermaceti organ and the sonar apparatus. For comparison, a human brain weighs about 3 pounds. A chimpanzee brain weighs around a pound. An elephant brain, often cited as the largest among land animals, weighs around 11 pounds. The sperm whale's brain is nearly double that. The sheer weight is striking enough, but weight alone does not determine what a brain can do. Structure matters more. And the structure of the sperm whale's brain shows something that researchers did not expect when they first examined it closely. The regions of the brain associated with social behavior, communication, and emotional processing are enlarged far beyond what the whale's body size alone would predict. These areas, including the limbic system and structures associated with long-term memory, are disproportionately large even compared to other cetaceans, which already have notably developed social brains. This tells scientists something important. The sperm whale's brain is not big primarily because the whale is big. The brain is big because the social and communicative life of this animal requires it. Sperm whales live in complex, multi-generational social groups. They form lasting bonds. They cooperate in raising young. They respond to the deaths of group members in ways that researchers describe as something resembling grief. Females and young whales stay together in family units for years, sometimes decades. The relationships between individuals in a pod are long-term and specific. The acoustic processing demands of the whale's sonar system also drive brain development. The amount of computation required to build a real-time three-dimensional sound map of the environment, track moving prey, filter echoes, and simultaneously monitor communication clicks from other pod members is enormous. The brain handles all of this in parallel, continuously, and then there is the cultural dimension. Different groups of sperm whales around the world produce different click patterns, distinct acoustic signatures that researchers call coders. These coders vary by population. Whales from the Caribbean produce different coders than whales from the Pacific. Whales from one Pacific group differ from whales in another Pacific group. The patterns are learned, not hardwired. Young whales acquire the coder pattern of their birth group by listening and practice. This is cultural transmission, the passing of learned behavior from one generation to the next through social contact, the same basic mechanism that allows human cultures to accumulate knowledge across time. A 20-pound brain, in the dark, managing sonar, managing social bonds, managing cultural information passed down through generations of a family group that has been hunting the same deep water for longer than human civilization has existed. And that culture, it turns out, includes something even more specific than regional dialects. It includes family-level signatures, individual click patterns that allow whales not just to identify their species, but to identify their specific family group from hundreds of miles away. The cultural life of the sperm whale is more complex than most people know. And what happens when calves are born into that culture, and how they learn to become part of it, is one of the most quietly remarkable stories in all of animal behavior. In the Pacific Ocean, two separate groups of sperm whales can hear each other from miles away, They both use clicks. They both produce rapid sequences of sound that carry through the water. But the patterns are different. The timing, the rhythm, the number of clicks in each sequence, all of it differs between groups in ways that are consistent within each group and distinct from all the others. These patterns are called codas. Scientists first identified them in the 1980s when researchers listening to recordings of sperm whale communication noticed that certain click sequences repeated in specific ways. A whale would produce a short burst of clicks with a distinctive rhythm, and another whale nearby would answer with a sequence of its own. The more recordings researchers collected, the more structure emerged. Codas were not random, they were consistent. The same patterns appeared in recordings made from the same whale populations across years and across different locations within a population's range. And the patterns differed between populations. Caribbean sperm whale groups use codas that researchers catalogued and mapped. Pacific populations use different ones. Within the Pacific, distinct regional groups have their own coda repertoires. Some codas appear across multiple groups, a kind of shared vocabulary. Others appear exclusively within a single group, specific to that community alone. The geographic distribution of coda types maps onto what researchers call vocal clans. A vocal clan is a group of whale pods scattered across a wide area of ocean that share the same coda repertoire. Vocal clans can include hundreds of individual whales spread across thousands of miles of ocean. They have never met each other, may never be in the same location at the same time, but they all produce the same coda patterns. The coda that identifies a vocal clan functions like a cultural flag. It is a signal that says, we belong to the same group, we share the same learned patterns, we come from the same tradition. How those patterns spread across animals that rarely meet in one place is a question researchers are still working out. The leading explanation involves the movement of young animals. When a young whale travels and encounters other pods, it interacts briefly, listens, and sometimes carries patterns back to its home group. Over generations, shared patterns spread slowly across wide areas of ocean. The codas also serve a more immediate purpose. Within a family group, coda exchanges appear during social interactions between specific individuals. Some researchers describe the exchanges as conversational, with one whale producing a coda and another responding in a way that is not a direct copy but a related pattern, an answer rather than an echo. Whether this constitutes something like actual conversation, an exchange of specific information between individuals, is something researchers approach carefully. The honest answer is that we do not know yet what the codas mean, if they carry specific content, or if they function more like identity signals. What we do know is that calves do not produce full codas at birth. They start with imprecise attempts and gradually refine them through practice and social exposure until the pattern matches the group's repertoire. That learning process is one of the clearest examples of cultural inheritance in the animal world. And what it means for how sperm whale society actually works changes the way you have to think about these animals. A sperm whale calf is born into a world of sound. It arrives after a gestation of roughly 14 to 16 months, already large, already capable of swimming. At birth, a calf is around 13 feet long. Within minutes it surfaces, breathes, and begins to orient toward its mother's clicks. In the first weeks of life, the calf stays close to the mother. The mother's coda clicks are constant. Other females in the group, the calf's aunts and grandmothers and older cousins, all produce their codas too. The calf is surrounded by the acoustic signature of its family from the moment it enters the world. Early attempts at vocalization from a young calf are imprecise. The click timing is off. The sequences are incomplete or slightly wrong. Researchers who recorded young calves and compared those recordings to the adult coda repertoire found that calves essentially babble, producing recognizable attempts that refine over months and years until the pattern is accurate enough to function as a real coda. This process mirrors, in a structural way, how human infants learn language. Exposure to the sounds of the surrounding community comes first. Imitation follows. Gradual refinement through social feedback continues over time. The result is a young animal that has acquired, through social learning and practice, the specific communicative patterns of its birth group. The calf does not inherit these patterns genetically. The patterns are learned. This is a cultural process, the same basic mechanism through which human children acquire language, through which musicians learn the traditions of their genre, through which craftspeople pass techniques to apprentices across generations. In the sperm whale, this cultural transmission has been running continuously for far longer than human civilization. The same coda patterns may have been passed from mother to calf for tens of thousands of years, accumulating and evolving slowly, branching into the distinct regional dialects researchers are documenting today. Some researchers have proposed that sperm whale vocal clans represent one of the clearest examples of animal culture in the natural world. A distinct, learned, socially transmitted behavioural tradition that defines group identity, persists across generations, and varies geographically in the same way that human cultural traditions vary. The implications of this extend beyond the interesting to the philosophically significant. If sperm whale codas represent a form of culture, then these animals are doing something that was once considered uniquely human. They are transmitting identity and tradition through learned behaviour rather than genetics. The family group is the vehicle for this transmission, and that family group becomes critical in another context entirely, when something large and fast arrives at the surface and the pod faces a threat from above rather than below. The defence they deploy is one of the most coordinated behavioural responses in the animal kingdom. Every whale in the group plays a specific role. The most vulnerable are protected, the strongest are positioned to do the most damage. And when that defence fails to stop the attackers, the whales reach for a weapon so unexpected and so effective that researchers watching it for the first time spent a moment in pure disbelief before writing it down. The threat comes from above. The sperm whale is the apex predator of the deep ocean. In the abyss, nothing challenges it, nothing hunts it. Nothing in those dark miles would even attempt to attack an adult sperm whale. But at the surface, between dives, the whale is a mammal that needs air. It cannot stay submerged forever, it must come up. And up there, in the lit water near the surface, something else holds the top position. Killer whales, commonly called orcas, are among the most intelligent and coordinated hunters in the ocean. A pod of orcas operates with a level of tactical cooperation that researchers compare to wolfpack behaviour, with specific roles assigned to different group members and strategies adapted in real time based on prey behaviour. Orcas do not typically attack healthy adult male sperm whales. The risk is too high. An adult male sperm whale is 60 feet long and 50 tons of muscle, with a tail fluke that can break a small boat. An orca that gets within range of that tail is in serious danger. But calves are vulnerable. Young females are vulnerable. Injured or sick adults are vulnerable. And orca pods have been documented actively coordinating to separate calves from their mothers and from the protective adults in the group. When an orca attack begins, the sperm whale pod responds immediately. The response is not a panic. The response is organised. The adult whales, particularly the large females and any adult males present, move toward the calves and the most vulnerable group members. They position themselves between the orcas and the young. Then they form the Marguerite formation. The name comes from the French word for daisy. From above, the configuration looks like the petals of a flower. The most vulnerable whales, the calves and nursing mothers, go to the centre of the formation with their heads pointing inward toward each other. The larger adults arrange themselves around the outside of this cluster, heads in, tails pointing outward. Every tail in that outer ring is a weapon. A sperm whale's tail fluke is wide, heavy, and driven by the most powerful muscles in the animal's body. A direct strike from a sperm whale tail can kill an orca. The outer ring, with every tail pointing out, presents the attacking orcas with a wall of lethal force in every direction. To reach the calves in the centre, the orcas must get through that wall. Documented attacks show that orca pods attempt to disrupt the formation by making repeated fast passes. trying to cause individual whales to break ranks. An orca that can panic one adult and separate it from the group changes the geometry of the defense. The gap it creates gives access to the interior. The sperm whales hold the formation. They maintain physical contact with each other, pressing together so there are no gaps between animals. They vocalize continuously, suggesting the coordination requires active communication to sustain. And when the orcas persist, something else happens. Something that surprised every researcher who first witnessed it. Something the sperm whales deploy that shifts the entire encounter in a direction no one expected. Picture it from above. A tight cluster of enormous animals, each one between 30 and 60 feet long, pressed together at the surface. Their heads point inward, their tails point outward in every direction. The smallest members, the calves and nursing mothers, are in the centre, completely surrounded. The orcas circle the formation. They are fast, coordinated, and they probe the edges. An orca darts toward one side. The tail on that side rises and swings. The orca pulls back. Another orca comes from a different angle. Another tail answers. The Marguerite Formation is not just a passive shield. The whales in the outer ring can track the movement of attackers and adjust their tail positions actively. Researchers observing attacks have noted that the outer whales turn and reposition as orcas move around the formation, always keeping tails facing the nearest threat. A sperm whale's tail fluke can reach up to 16 feet from tip to tip on a large adult. The muscles that drive it are among the most powerful in nature, built to push a 50-ton animal through the water at speed. When that tail accelerates through its full range of motion and connects with something, the force is tremendous. Orcapods with experience attacking sperm whales show clear behavioural changes when the Marguerite forms. The attack's slow. The circling becomes more cautious. The orcas that have been struck by tail flukes in previous encounters stay farther back. The formation works because the cost of getting close is too high and too unpredictable. But the formation is not without its vulnerabilities. It requires every adult to hold position. A prolonged attack tests the endurance of the formation as well as the patience of the orcas. If the orca pod is large enough and persistent enough, they can sometimes wear down the outer ring through sheer time. And the formation has a biological limitation. The whales need to breathe. Their blowholes are on top of their heads, which are pointed inward during the formation. The surface access is reduced. Calves in the centre have the worst position for breathing. Extended formations can put the calves at respiratory risk. Researchers observing documented attacks noted that most successful orca attacks on sperm whale calves involved either very small, loosely organised groups without enough large adults to form a complete outer ring, or prolonged sieges that eventually broke the formation down through exhaustion. For a full-sized, well-organised adult pod, the Marguerite Formation appears to be extremely effective. Many documented attacks ended with the orcas withdrawing without injuring any sperm whale. But the tail wall is only the first layer of defence. When the formation holds but the orcas do not leave, when the circling continues and the pressure builds, the sperm whales add something else to the equation. Something biological. Something the orcas did not evolve a clean answer to. Something that researchers, watching it happen for the first time from a research vessel, had a hard time processing before they started taking notes. The orcas are still circling. The Marguerite Formation has held for several minutes. The tails have deterred direct contact. But the orcas are persistent, probing the edges, looking for a gap, waiting for an exhausted adult to drift slightly out of position. Then the water around the formation turns dark. One after another, the sperm whales in the outer ring begin releasing enormous quantities of feces into the water. The material is liquid, rich in biological matter, and it disperses rapidly in the current. Within seconds, the water surrounding the formation becomes thick and brown, visibility inside the cloud dropping to nearly zero. The orcas, approaching from the outside, suddenly cannot see what they are targeting. The sonar they use is disrupted by the dense particulate in the water. the chemical signals they rely on to track prey are overwhelmed by an intense biological smell. The precision of their attack breaks down. This is defensive defecation, and it is deliberate. Researchers who have observed it describe the timing as too consistent to be a stress response. The sperm whales release feces at the specific moment when orca pressure on the formation increases, and they do it as a coordinated behaviour, multiple animals releasing simultaneously, maximising the cloud volume. The behaviour has been documented in multiple populations across different oceans. It is not unique to one group or one region. Sperm whales around the world use this defence when killer whale attacks persist beyond what the tail wall alone can manage. Some researchers have also described the whales using their tails to actively spread the fecal cloud, slapping the water near the formation to push the material outward in the direction of the attackers. Whether this tail behaviour is intentional or coincidental is still debated, but the effect is to extend the cloud further than passive dispersal alone would achieve. The orca's response to the cloud varies. Some pods pull back immediately, retreating to cleaner water and circling at a distance. Others continue probing, but with less precision, their coordination disrupted by reduced visibility. In several documented cases, the orca pods abandoned the attack entirely after the cloud was deployed. The combination of the tail wall and the chemical barrier gives the sperm whale pod a two-layer defense system against one of the most sophisticated predators in the ocean. The tail wall stops direct physical attacks. The cloud disrupts the sensory and coordination systems that make the orca pod effective in the first place. A pod of orcas that loses precise visual and chemical tracking in a fecal cloud is suddenly much less dangerous. They are still fast and still intelligent, but their primary advantages over the sperm whale, speed, coordination, and tactical precision, are all compromised when they cannot see or smell what they are attacking. The sperm whale, for all its size and strength, is also a highly social animal with cultural memory, and that culture includes knowing how to survive an attack from the ocean's most coordinated predator. But the young males in the pod will eventually leave all of this behind. They will leave the family group, leave the warm tropical water, and travel thousands of miles alone toward colder and darker seas. That journey, and what happens to those young males when they finally arrive, is one of the loneliest stories in the ocean. At some point, the young male leaves. There is no ceremony, no clear trigger that researchers can point to. The young male, somewhere between 5 and 15 years old, stops travelling with his mother's pod and begins moving on his own. The direction is almost always the same, away from the warm, tropical and subtropical waters where he was born, north or south toward colder seas. Female sperm whales spend their entire lives in those warmer waters, between roughly 40 degrees north and 40 degrees south latitude. The family groups, the nursery pods, the multi-generational clusters of related females and their young, all of them stay in that relatively warm band of ocean for life. The males leave it. The journey is not short. A young male sperm whale travelling from tropical waters toward polar seas may cover thousands of miles before reaching the productive, cold water that large adult males prefer. He travels alone. No pod. No family cliques in the water around him. No group to form a defensive ring if orcas appear. The risks during this period are real. Lone young males are more vulnerable to killer whale attack than animals in a group. They are still growing, still developing the enormous body size that will eventually make them nearly untouchable. In the years between leaving the birth pod and reaching full adult size, a male sperm whale occupies a vulnerable middle ground. The motivation to make the journey anyway appears to be food. The cold polar and subpolar waters are enormously productive. The deep cold ocean near Antarctica and in the North Atlantic supports massive populations of large squid, including colossal squid in the Southern Ocean. A large male sperm whale that makes it to these waters has access to prey that the family group back in the tropics rarely encounters. Adult males eventually reach their maximum size in their 20s and 30s. At that point, they weigh over 50 tons and stretch 60 feet long. The size difference between mature males and the females and young animals in the family pods is one of the largest of any mammal species on Earth. A fully grown male is roughly twice the size of an adult female. That size gives the male access to the largest prey and the deepest dives. The most experienced adult males in subpolar waters are the whales most likely to be regularly encountering colossal squid. They are the ones whose stomachs hold the largest beaks. They are the ones whose faces carry the widest gouge marks. They return to tropical waters occasionally to encounter and mate with female groups. But they do not stay. They move back toward the cold, productive feeding grounds, back toward the dark, back toward the deep. Some males spend decades cycling between brief social contact in tropical waters and long solo feeding seasons in polar waters. The solitary nature of adult male sperm whale life is striking given how social the family pods are. The same species produces two completely different social patterns, one intensely communal for females, one largely solitary for males, all within the same population. The biology that enables those solo polar dives, the size, the oxygen reserves, the sonar power, all of it reaches its maximum expression in the adult male. The biggest animal, the deepest diver, the most scarred, the most capable, and the most extreme. A female sperm whale is not a small animal. She reaches around 40 feet in length at full maturity. She weighs around 15 tons. She is longer than most city buses and heavier than 2 African elephants standing together. In almost any other context, she would be the largest animal in the room. Next to a full-grown adult male, she looks small. The mature male sperm whale reaches 60 feet, sometimes a bit more. He weighs over 50 tons. The difference in length between the largest males and the average adult females is roughly 20 feet. The weight difference is even more extreme proportionally. The largest males weigh 3 to 4 times as much as the largest females. This degree of size difference between sexes is called sexual dimorphism, and in most mammal species it is moderate. Male lions are larger than females, but not 3 times larger. Male gorillas are bigger than females, but the gap does not approach what you see in sperm whales. Elephant seals come closest among other mammals, and even they do not quite reach the same ratio. The reason for this extreme size difference connects directly to the social structure and reproductive biology of the species. Adult males compete with each other for mating access to female groups. Larger males win those competitions more often. Over millions of years of this pattern, evolutionary pressure pushed male size upward continuously, while female size stayed constrained by the different demands of pregnancy, nursing, and raising calves in tropical waters. The size difference also corresponds to a difference in diving capability. The massive adult males can dive deeper than females. Their oxygen reserves, scaled to body size, give them longer bottom time. Their larger sonar apparatus produces more powerful clicks. Their jaw strength exceeds the females. Everything about the adult male body is calibrated for more extreme performance in the deep. The largest males are also the most scarred. Decades of colossal squid encounters in the cold, deep waters of the Southern Ocean and the North Atlantic accumulate on their skin in dense layers of circular marks and hook gouges. An old adult male recovered by researchers or stranded on a beach carries a face that is almost entirely scar tissue, the original skin texture replaced by pale, layered marks from a lifetime of battles. Those battles happen in water that sits near the limits of what any warm-blooded animal can physically tolerate. The sperm whale's biology has pushed into a zone where the environment itself is nearly incompatible with life as we understand it, and the animal thrives there. But the whale's prey, the colossal squid especially, may push even further than the whale does. The maximum size of these animals, what they could theoretically reach given enough time and enough deep cold water, is a number that scientists have never been able to confirm, and the reason they cannot confirm it is stored in the whale's stomach. In beaks too large to match any squid ever captured, in marks too wide to match any specimen ever measured, the ocean is keeping a secret. And the evidence that the secret exists is sitting on the skin and inside the gut of every old male sperm whale still alive. Every size estimate for the colossal squid starts the same way: a fragment. A beak recovered from a whale's stomach, a a piece of tentacle preserved in cold water, a sucker scar on a whale's skin measured and photographed by a researcher who then did the math backward to figure out how large the squid would have needed to be to leave a mark that size. The fragments have never matched a complete specimen. The largest colossal squid ever captured whole was recovered from Antarctic waters in 2007. It weighed just over 1,100 pounds. Its tentacles carried the rotating hooks that distinguish the species. It was the largest cephalopod ever directly measured by science. But it was not the largest colossal squid. Beak fragments recovered from sperm whale stomachs indicate animals significantly larger than any complete specimen ever documented. When researchers measure the lower rostral length of a colossal squid beak, which is essentially the main cutting portion of the beak, they can use scaling equations developed from measured specimens to estimate total body weight and mantle length. Some of the beaks from whale stomachs applying those same equations produce estimates for animals with mantle lengths exceeding anything in the direct measurement record by a significant margin. If the scaling equations hold at larger sizes, and there is debate about whether they do, then the colossal squid can reach sizes well beyond 1,100 pounds. The same problem applies to the giant squid. The confirmed maximum length from a complete specimen is around 43 feet. Sucker scar diameters on some sperm whales, when measured and scaled to the arm diameter they imply, suggest animals with tentacle spans beyond what any captured or photographed specimen has shown. The ocean is simply very large, and the colossal squid lives in one of its most inaccessible regions, thousands of feet below the surface of the Southern Ocean, in water that humans can barely reach even with advanced submersibles. The deepest confirmed colossal squid encounters are in the range of 7,000 feet down. What lives at 10,000 feet in the same waters is unknown. No research submersible has filmed a colossal squid alive in its natural habitat at depth. Every complete specimen ever studied was either caught in fishing nets at moderate depths, recovered dead from whale stomachs, or found dead at the surface. The living animal, in its actual environment, at its actual depth, doing what it actually does, has never been directly observed. This means every description of colossal squid behaviour, including how it interacts with the sperm whale, how fast it moves, how it attacks, how it uses its hooks, is inferred from anatomy and from the secondary evidence those encounters leave on the whale's body. The actual fight, the actual animal, the actual maximum size remain unknown, and the ocean where these unknowns exist is, by every measure scientists use, the least explored environment on Earth. More of the surface of the Moon has been mapped in detail than the deep ocean floor. The deep sea holds unknowns that are not minor gaps in our knowledge. They are entire categories of biology we have never seen. The surface of Mars has been mapped more thoroughly than the deep ocean floor. This is a factual statement, and it reframes everything. Scientists have detailed topographic maps of Mars compiled from decades of satellite imaging and rover data. The deep ocean floor, by contrast, remains largely unmapped at useful resolution. The best global maps of the ocean floor are based on satellite gravity measurements, which give a rough outline but miss features smaller than around 3 miles across. An underwater mountain the size of a city could sit undetected in the abyssal plain. The reason for this gap is simple. Space is hard to reach, but easy to observe from a distance. The deep ocean is easy to reach in terms of distance. It is just miles away straight down, but extraordinarily difficult to observe directly. Water blocks the electromagnetic waves that satellites use to map surfaces. Sound is the only tool that penetrates deep water effectively, and acoustic mapping at the resolution needed to see biological scale features requires ships moving slowly back and forth across enormous areas for years. Most of the ocean has never received that treatment. What we do know about the deep ocean reveals an ecosystem of astonishing complexity. The abyssal zone is not empty. It is not a biological desert. It is an environment where the food chain operates on different energy sources than sunlight, where creatures have evolved forms and capabilities that do not resemble anything near the surface, and where the total biomass of living things may be comparable to the entire surface ocean. The sperm whale connects these worlds. Every time a whale dives to 7,000 feet and catches a colossal squid, it removes a large amount of biological material from the deep and carries it back toward the surface. When the whale defecates near the surface, the nutrients from that deep prey enter the sunlit zone, where they fuel plankton growth, which fuels fish, which fuels the entire surface food web. The sperm whale is, in biological terms, a nutrient pump. It moves energy from the deep to the surface on a massive scale. Scientists who studied this effect found that sperm whale populations in productive waters contribute a measurable quantity of surface nutrients through this vertical transfer of biological material. When sperm whale populations were devastated by commercial whaling in the 18th and 19th centuries, this nutrient pump was disrupted. Surface productivity in some areas declined. The effects propagated through food webs in ways that took decades for researchers to begin identifying. The whale is not separate from the ocean system. The whale is part of the system's infrastructure, and the battles in the dark, the hunts that look like isolated violent encounters between two large animals, are not isolated at all. They are the mechanism of nutrient transfer. The violence is part of how the ocean feeds itself. Every scar on the whale's face is a transaction in that system. Every squid beak in a whale's stomach represents a transfer of energy from the deep cold dark to the warm sunlit surface. The whale carries all of it. Carries the scars, the beaks, the cultural memory, the family bonds, the sonar maps, the capacity to go deeper than almost any warm-blooded animal alive. And what that combination of extreme capability and extreme experience ultimately tells us about life at its furthest limits is something that changes how you see not just this animal, but the entire concept of survival. Every old sperm whale alive today has won every fight it has ever had. The ones that lost those fights did not come back up. There is no participation record in the deep ocean. The whale at the surface, breathing slowly after a 2-hour dive, covered in thousands of circular marks and hook gouges across its face, earned every breath it is taking. The evidence is permanent and visible on its skin. What the sperm whale represents as a biological system is life operating at the absolute edge of what a warm-blooded animal can sustain. It breathes air but operates in an environment with no air. It relies on light at the surface but hunts in total darkness. It is social by nature, but spends enormous portions of its life in complete solitude. It carries the largest brain on Earth inside a head, designed for a kind of sensory experience fundamentally different from anything humans use to navigate the world. It is, in almost every measurable way, an extreme animal. What that extreme tells us is something both simple and profound. Life does not stay where it is safe. Life expands into every available space, every gradient of temperature and pressure and light, and it builds whatever it needs to survive there. The sperm whale's flexible ribcage, its dark oxygen-storing muscles, its oil-filled ballast organ, its 236 decibel sonar, all of it is the record of a lineage that kept pushing deeper over millions of years, finding more food, outcompeting rivals, building new solutions to impossible problems. The squid did the same thing from the other direction. The colossal squid, with its rotating hooks and its steel-cutting beak and its dinner plate eyes, tuned to detect the faintest bioluminescent flash in total darkness, evolved in those same impossible conditions and became something almost as extreme as the thing that hunts it. Two animals, both pushing against the limits of what biology can sustain, meeting in the dark at 7,000 feet, and the result is a fight that reshapes the entire ocean food web above them. This is the part of the story that is easy to miss when you focus on the violence and the scars. The deep battles are not just dramatic. They are functional. They are part of how the ocean works. The sperm whale and the colossal squid are not adversaries in some separate story happening below the real ocean. They are central characters in a system that extends all the way to the surface, all the way to the plankton and the fish and the birds and the coastlines where humans build their cities. The ocean is one system. The depth is not separate from the surface, and the animal descending into the dark right now, holding its breath, its sonar clicking, its muscles dark with stored oxygen, is doing something that keeps that system running. It goes down because it has to, because 50 tons of muscle and 20 pounds of brain require an enormous amount of food. Because the food is down there. Because the tools to reach it are built into every cell of its body. It comes back up carrying the proof of what it found. Scars across its face, beaks inside its stomach, and somewhere in its clicking, an acoustic record of every hunt it has ever run in the dark. The ocean has many secrets. Most of them live at depth. And the sperm whale carries more of those secrets than any other animal alive.